What is beautiful about Eden is, in this country, in Eretz Yisrael, there is so much strife between from and non-from, especially now, after Bchiras, elections, coalition negotiations. Seems to be so much sinna, so much hatred, so much strife. But when tragedy strikes, it is so obvious that we are one. In many totally Chiloni neighborhoods, people were standing in line to donate blood. Total Chiloni. Some people that are very close to me that work in a totally non-from environment told me that today it was like Tisha B'Av. And everybody was so heartbroken. I don't think there's anything like this anywhere in the world. So in America, when a Meshuggah walks into a school or a supermarket with a shotgun, with a machine gun, and he kills 15 people, it's in the news, but I don't think the average person in the street feels heartbroken. He doesn't mourn. We don't know the people. It's a political issue. Eden are different. Kulonu b'nei echad nachnu. And when tragedy strikes, all the mechitzas, all the walls, all the moats just melt away. And we really feel as one. So this morning I said a shir in one of the koilim, and I spoke about this tragedy. And all I could say was, Vayidoim aharoin. Let's try to imagine the circumstances, what happened. It was a joyous event that Klal Yisrael was waiting hundreds of years. After hundreds of years in Golas Mitzrayim, finally, we were zeichet to Geulas Mitzrayim. We left Eretz Mitzrayim a free people. And from Eretz Mitzrayim, we got to Har Sinai, Kabbalah Soter, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's promises, V'yosi li Migdosh, V'shulchanti b'soicham. And we got there. Yom Shmini leMeluim. What a simcha. We could just try to imagine. We got Torahs Hashem, and now we have the Mishkan, Asheros HaShechina, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be with us. And Aaron HaKohen comes down after he was makra v'sachatos v'su oile v'sashlomim v'yesu es yodam ala v'yavorchem, and then tragedy strikes. Shnei b'nei Aharon Nadav v'Avihu tzadikim gemurim, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, they were greater than me and you. V'teitze eish melefnei Hashem. It's a eish melefnei Hashem, and the eish consumed Shnei b'nei Aharon. What a tragedy. What does Aaron have to say? Vayidoim Aharon. He has nothing to say. Sometimes we have nothing to say. We could only cry. There's a medrash pliyah. He could have said something, but he preferred not to say. What did he have to say? The medrash says, B'yom hashmini yimol b'sar halosai, v'yehi b'yom hashmini, b'yom hashmini yimol b'sar halosai. What does that have to do? There's a Gemara Nidad of Lamed Aleph and Beis. Lamo amru Torah tinok nimo lishmini. Shaloye kulam smeichim v'ovev v'imoi atzuvim. So Shivas Yemei Tumah must pass before the bris. Otherwise, everybody's going to be happy. The cousins, the uncles, the aunts, the bovet, the seida, everybody's going to be happy. And father and mother of the child will be sad. That is why the Torah says, Aaron HaKohen could have said, Rabbi Shalom, how could this be? Do I deserve this? Everybody is going to be happy. And I, the Kohen Gadol, I, that did so much to bring Klal Yisrael to this day, I will mourn for my children. Aaron had what to say, but he preferred to say nothing. What could we say? What did Reb Shimon say up in the heavens? So the entire Jewish world is happy. And my children, the ones that made the effort to come to Miran, to be Sameach b'simchosi, and they will mourn their children. We have no questions. A Jew never asks questions. I said 1,000,000 times what I once heard from Moiri Berabi, Kodesh, Torah, the Klois Magarabi, the Debriyanse. I once heard from him. I went through the Holocaust, he said. I lost my wife and 11 children, my entire family. Of ein Regel, not for one moment did I question the Kodesh Baruch Hu's ways. And I remember decades passed since then. I thought probably was 30, 40 years ago. But a shudder went through me when I heard those words, and every time I repeat them. We could just cry and daven. In the depths of our hearts, we believe in a way which is above and beyond our understanding. So these korbanos tzibur should be melitza yosef aklan yisrael shelo yeshom hashoyim v'sheva. We should only hear the statements. So the topic we are discussing today is everything okay? Because I see a blank screen. So do you see and hear me, Reb Shlomo?
Rebbe, we see the Rav perfectly. We hear the Rav perfectly.
We hear you. We're waiting to put on whatever member you discuss.
Okay.
We heard you.
So the topic we are discussing today is a CS Melacha Motzoi Shabbos Lifnei Havdala. And we're dealing with 3 different Gemaras. And I will just go through these 3 Gemaras briefly. Lefi Seder, Shabbos Kuf Yud Ches Amud Beis Omer Reb Yosi. Yehei Chelki Imekablei Shabbos B'Tferia V'Moitziei Shabbos B'Tzipori. Very brief. Shabbos Kuf Yud Ches Amud Beis. Fundamentally, what it means that one should be Magdim Lekabel Shabbos as soon as possible, and Ma'achar Yitzias Shabbos as late as possible. And that is obviously Tosefes Shabbos. So Rabbi Yosi doesn't teach us a halacha in this Gemara, but Yehei Chelki. Halavai should always be Zoichon to be Memekable Shabbos, Machnise Shabbos B'Tveria, that was early, Motzei Shabbos B'Tzipori, that was late. And we skip 32 blot, Kuf Nun Omid Beis, Osala Odam Sheyaseh Chafetzav, Koidim Sheyavdil. And in this Gemara, it is a clear halacha. Chazal use the expression Osala Odam Lasis Chafetzav Koidim Sheyavdil. What does Chafetzav mean? Does it mean a malacha? Or just deal with his personal matters? It is clear. In Rambam and in Shulchan Aruch, it means a malach. And then the Gemara discusses, do we mean Avdala B'Tfilah, Avdala Lakois, And the Gemara says, Rav Nosson Barami Kami Gerova, and Rav Abba Rav Ashi, B'marava Amrinan Hochi, Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyol, Va'avdinan Surchin. Rav Kahana says the same. Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyol, Umesaltinan Silti. And this halacha is brought Rambam Perik Choftes, Halacha Hevov Hilchos Shabbos, Shulchan Aruch Eish Sedik Tes Yud. But we're not finished with the Gemaras yet. Psachim Nun Amud Beis. Koloisa Melacha. Erev Shabbos Min HaMincha V'Lamalo. Moitzoi Shabbos Einoi Roya Simen Broch. So the Gemara Psachim seems to say Einoi Roya Simen Brocha, but it's not an Isur. Maybe it is an Isur, but it's not an Isur D'Oraisa. It's not an Isur Chomer. So the Gemara says, Einoi Roya Simen Broch. Let's have a look at Rashi. Moitzoi Shabbos Psachim. It's on our screen. Psachim Nun Amud Beis. Moitzoi Shabbos Mishum Kvod Shabbos. Shemoisifin Machal Ala Kodesh. And this Rashi is somewhat puzzling. Does Rashi mean to say that Tosefes Shabbos is Mishum Kvod Shabbos? Well, there's a huge machlokes in the Rishonim. It's Tosefes Shabbos Min HaTorah Midrabanan. The Rambam paskins there is no Tosefes Shabbos at all. La Halacha V'Lamaisa. But Rashi says Mishum Kvod Shabbos Shemoisifin Machal Ala Kodesh. Going back to Shabbos Kuf Nun Amud Beis, when the Gemara says, Osla Odam Sheyaseh Chafetzav Ad Sheyavdil, and the Gemara says, Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer. Let's have a look at Rashi there. Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer, that is enough. Lehekera Ba'almo, Lelavois Es HaMelech. So even though the Gemara Shabbos Kuf Nun uses an expression of Isur, not only Einoi Roya Simen Brocha, Rashi explains, even before Kiddush Alakois, even before Kiddush B'Tfilah, even before Abdala Alakois, even before Abdala B'Tfilah, you just say Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer. Hekera Ba'al Melalavis Es HaMelech. And that would fit in with the Rashi and Psachim Kvod Shabbos. But Rashi says, Moisifin Mechol Ala Kodesh. I think we must say Rashi. Rashi doesn't mean Tosefes Shabbos. The Tosefes Shabbos is enough. A rega kememra, a minute, a half a minute is Tosefes Shabbos. Tosefes Shabbos doesn't necessarily necessitate saying Havdalah. The Isur to do a melacha till you say Havdalah is Mishum Kvod Shabbos. And that is how we understand Rashi, Hekera Ba'alma, Lelavois Es HaMelech. So once again, 3 Gemaras. Shabbos Kuf Yud Ches, it's just Rabbi Yossi. And he says, Halavai, I should be Soicha. To be Mekabel Shabbos as soon as possible, and Moitzi Shabbos as late as possible. Shabbos Kuf Nun, Osala Odom Sheyaseh Chafetzav Ad Sheyavdil, but the Gemara makes it clear, Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer. The Rosh maintains you need to say a brocha, Borech Atu Hashem Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer, which is the nusach of Havdalah. But the Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, most Rishonim say it is enough to say Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer. It is clear in the Rambam, as I quoted, Shulchan Aruch Reish Tzadik Tes Sif Yud. And that is Pashtus Lashon HaGemara. Rav Kahana Ava Omar Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer. B'marova Amrinen Hochi Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer. Some Rishonim maintain what the Gemara means is actually the bracha. You need to say Baruch Atu Hashem Amavdil Ben Kodesh L'choyer, but most of the Rishonim, and that is the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. And the Aruch Shulchan writes this at length. The halacha is you just need to say something. And Rashi says, Hekera ba'alma lelavois es HaMelech. Tosfos quotes Yerushalmi. Tosfos in Psachim Nun Amud Beis. Yerushalmi says, those women that don't do a melacha mitzvah Shabbos, that is a mistake. That is not a minig that is binding. But those that don't do a melacha aditispani sudra, that is a proper minhag. So Tosis on the top of the page, I think it's the first Tosis. We need to scroll down. Weiss melacha mitzvah Shabbos. Isa b'Yerushalmi hochi. Hani noshe denige de loyle me'eved avidite be'afuka Shabbos lav minhaga. That's not a minig which is binding. Antitispani sidra minhaga. And Tosis explains, sheyashlim atfila min hakosher. Sheyashlim atfila. Obahu ayrenami hochi. So Tosis is somewhat puzzling. Sheyashlim atfila, and Tosis says that's pshat in our Gemara. So maybe the Gemara in Shabbos, when the Gemara says a lashon iso, that is until you say I'm having mekadosh l'chol. But I noted before that the lashon of the Gemara in Psochim is eine roya simin brocha. This seems to say it's not an iso. Eine roya simin brocha. According to Tosis, we understand. An iso is only unless you said havdalah kol dehi. Havdalah kol shehi. If you said I'm having mekadosh l'chol, there no longer is an iso. But the minhag is based on the Yerushalmi until you finish davening. We will come back to this Yerushalmi and Tosis towards the end of the Shia, but have it in mind. Remember the point I am making. So in Shabbos Kuf Nun, we speak about an Isser. Psochim, we speak about a Zgula. Ein roya siman brocha. There must be a difference. Doesn't seem to be the same. If it's an Isser, why would Chasal say Ein roya siman brocha? It's not a Taina. It's not a Pircha. We could say, besides the Isser, Ein roya siman brocha. For some people, Ein roya siman brocha would be more concerning, more discerning, more aggravating than an Isser. Well, it shouldn't be that way. But for some people, it might be. So Chazal say, Ein roya siman brocha. But based on Tosis, I would say, an Isser, as you said, I'm not going to there no longer is an Isser. But Ein roya siman brocha ad sheyashlim atfila. The Meiri, in Psochim Nun Amid Beis, we find Eloshen, ad sheyashlim kol sheregilim loime b'mitzvah Shabbos. So Tosis writes Yashlim Tfilasoi, which means say that a tefillah. The Meiri says, Kol sheregilim loimer mitzvah Shabbos. If you say v'yitin lacha, then you need to wait for v'yitin lacha. Lachatchel you need ad titispani sidrei. That is what Tosis calls from the Yerushalmi. The Brisker of Perik Chavtes in a Sefer al Rambam. And let me make a short introduction. The Brisker of was a giant. He was a giant. Vidvorav bekol mokem kilurin le'einayim. So sweet, with such sweetness and clarity. Lahalacha harbe yesh lefalton velefakpek. So the Brisker of, like Reb Chaim, they didn't write Piskei Halacha. We know that Reb Chaim, due to his unbelievable Yiras Shamayim, tried to stay away from Psak. And the Poisek and Brisk was Reb Simcha Zelig. Reb Simcha Zelig Rieger was his name. He was the Poisek and Brisk. And Reb Chaim and the Brisker Rav were Sleimach and Reb Simcha Zelig, Lelo Oirerin. Reb Chaim didn't want to pass him. And the same the Brisker Rav, but the Brisker Rav has some Gevaligi Yisoidus and Halacha, even though he shied away from Sak Halacha L'Maisa. So Griz al Rambam is an amazing sefer. The Voram Mesukin Kidvash. La Halacha, Abi Yesh Lefak Ve'Kidar Koshel Torah. And it is important for me to say this in introduction. So the Brisker Rav says, there are two drachim to understand what is the Isra Asiyas Malacha ad Sheyavdel. Yesh Loimar. As long as a person doesn't say Abdullah, there still is Kedushas HaShabbos. I'm quoting the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Koten Lamed Gimel Reish Sadik Tes. Do I have a Mishnah Berurah? Yes, I have it on my table. Interesting. So in Reish Sadik Tes, Sif Yud, when the Shulchan Aruch says, Osalas Rishon Maloche Koidem Shiavdio, Mishnah Berurah Sif Koten Lamed Gimel. After Mishnah Techshach, Kiven Sholei Hivdel, Adayin Chal Ben Mikzas Kedushas HaShabbos Olav. Interesting. I won't let you go. We have it on our screen. So let's continue Sif Koten Lamed Dalet. Oimer, Amavdel ben Kodesh L'chayil. Belevush Isa, Oimer, Baruch Amavdel ben Kodesh L'chayil. Makon mokom eina nikra ze bracha. Kivin she'eina oimer shem b'malchus. ומה שדי בלושן הזה לעניין עשייס מלאכה, שהוא לקרב בעל מלאבס es המלך. What I want to point out from this Mishnah Berurah seems to be a stira minei bay. From Sif Koten Lamed Gimel to Sif Koten Lamed Dalet. So Sif Koten Lamed Gimel, he says that Mitzvahs Kedushas HaShabbos. But then he says, you don't even need to say a bracha. Baruch Hamadu ben Kodesh L'chayil. It's just a heka b'yalman and lavois es hamelech. What I want to point out, it's not a stira. Chal b'mitzvahs kedushas HaShabbos doesn't really mean kedushas HaShabbos mitzat Tosefes Shabbos, not min haTorah but not midrabanon. Hekera ba'al melelavois es hamelech. It is as if there still is kedushas HaShabbos. And what I say is contrary to the Havon of many Achronim, and maybe the Briskerov as well, and they understood Kedushas HaShabbos means Kedushas HaShabbos, and there is an Isur Melacha. So the Mishnah Berurah in Lamed Gimel says Kedushas HaShabbos. Lamed Dalet, he says, it's just an Indian of Heker, L'Lavois es hamelech. And I mentioned Rashi in Psochim, Kvoid Shabbos. So let's get back to the Briskerov. The Briskerov says, Shtei drochim, two different darkei havona. What is the Isur of Asiyas Melacha Koidem Shiavda? One would be, yes, Kedushas HaShabbos. Not min haTorah. We don't necessarily mean Tosefes Shabbos. Tosefes Shabbos is not dependent on Abdullah. But even after the Tosefes Shabbos is over, Midrabanan, there still is Kedushas HaShabbos until one makes Abdullah. The other Mahalach, according to the Briskerov, would be no. It's just a din in Abdullah, like many other mitzvahs. When a mitzvah is incumbent upon you, and when you have a chiyuv to perform a mitzvah, to do a mitzvah, you cannot be osik in tzarchei. And in some mitzvahs, there's an isur achila, shtia. So maybe the isur of asiyas malacha, before you say Avdola, has nothing to do with Kedushas HaShabbos at all. It has to do with the mitzvah of Avdola. And as long as you didn't do Avdola, also asiyas malacha. And the Briskerov wants to say this is a machlokes between Rashi and Rambam. According to Rashi, L'Lavois es hamelech, Kvoid Shabbos, there still is somewhat Kedushas HaShabbos. The Rambam, Perichov Tes Halacha Hey, and I have the Rambam, probably we have it on your sheet. I'm just looking into my Rambam. Oser Lo Adam. Lecho Eloi Lishtois. V'chein Mishiyotzu Hayoim. Rambam Perichov Tes Halacha Hey. The Rambam starts off before Kiddush. V'chein Mishiyotzu Hayoim. Oser Lo Lahatcha Lechel V'Lishtois V'Lasas Malocha Ad Sheyavdiu. So the Briskerov argues the fact that the Rambam brings together Lechol Oy Lishtois, Oy Lasois Malacha proves these three are the same. Lechel v'lishtas definitely have nothing to do with Kedushas and Shabbos. Well, Shabbos we eat and drink. Lechel v'lishtas definitely has to do with mitzvahs abdala. Just like a lechel v'lishtas before Kiddush. You can't eat or drink before Kiddush. The same for Abdullah. And the Rambam puts them together. So according to the Rambam, the Yisrael Vasiyas Malach has nothing to do with Kedushas Shabbos. It has to do with mitzvahs Abdullah. According to Rashi, Kedushas Shabbos. On the brisker of rice, there are 3 nafkaminas between these 2 different approaches. But before we go to the nafkaminas, I just want to bring a source from Gedolei HaPoiskim, which would support the briskerov, because soon I'm going to argue against this mahalach. But Gavra Rabba Omer Lamils. So there's a machloikes the levush and the taz. The levush. And this is a fascinating levush in Reish Samach Gimel. Sif Yud Zayin. The levush in Reish Samach Gimel argues that Erev Shabbos, in the Zman of the Sefer Shabbos, if a person takes upon himself an early Shabbos, it is very common in America, summer days, especially in country, people are makabel on early Shabbos. It is becoming more and more in Minig and Yerushalayim as well. The ones that brought this Minig to Yerushalayim are primarily Chutznikim. And some Gedolim say it's against Minig Yerushalayim. I don't think so. I am Mata Lechatchila, and I don't think it has anything to do with Minig Yerushalayim. Totally legitimate. There's no difference between America and Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. So the Levush says, if you're Makabel an early Shabbos, it is Muta Lechatchila for that, the person that was Makabel an early Shabbos, to ask somebody that was not Makabel Shabbos to do a melacha for him. I was Makabel Shabbos, but you not. I could be nana from the melacha you do, because to you, it's not Shabbos. However, Motzei Shabbos, if Reuven was already Mavdil, and Shimon did not do Avdola, Shimon could not ask it even to do a melacha. And Shimon could not derive benefit or hanoah from the melacha that Reuven did. And the Levush explains what is the difference. Erev Shabbos is just a gather of neder. Neder is subjective. I am a kabbal alatzmi, but it has nothing to do with you. Motzei Shabbos, writes the Levush, it is keilu a hemshech of kedushas Shabbos. So it has the dinam of Shabbos. And just like Shabbos, I can't ask another Yid to do something for me to do a melacha, the same as Motzei Shabbos. So the Levush, going back almost 500 years, the Levush says, yes, Motzei Shabbos kodim sheyavdu, it is like a continuity of Shabbos. The Taz, Sif Koden Gimel, totally rejects the Levush. And the Taz says, doesn't make sense. And he quotes Rashi, Heker bi'alma, lelavois es hamelech. There's no such a thing. Shabbos is nimshach to me and not to you. Tosefes Shabbos ein lo shiur. But there's no such a thing that there's a hemshech of kedushas Shabbos. The Taz says, isn't Rashi clear? Heker ba'alma, lelavois es hamelech. So let's come back to the Briskerov. So the Briskerov says, Shnei Drochim, 2 ways to understand. The Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Nun Amud Beis, Osala Adam Sheyasa Malocha Ad Sheyar. And the Rebbe says, according to Rashi, Kedushas Shabbos. According to the Rambam, Mitzvahs Havdalah has nothing to do with Kedushas Shabbos. So I quoted the Machlokes the Levush and the Taz. Just coming back to the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Koten Lamed Gimel, the Mishnah Berurah says, Mitzvahs Kedushas Shabbos. Sifkot Lamed Dalet Lelabais is a melech. Hekera ba'alma. So obviously, when the Mishnah Berurah says Miktzas Kedushas Shabbos Olav, it doesn't mean to the extreme of the levush that it's a hemshech of Kedushas Shabbos. The Bris Karav seems to coincide with the levush. It's a hemshech of Kedushas Shabbos. But he wants to impose this pshat on Rashi. So Rashi, Shabbos Kuf Yudches says Kavod Shabbos. Psochim Nun Amid Bey. Shabbos Kuf Nun says Hekera Ba'alma Lelavois says Shabbos. So the Bris Karav says there are three nafkaminas. First nafkamina, according to Rashi, if it's a hemshech of Kedushas Shabbos, all the malachas are also. According to the Rambam, only a malacha gemura. Because if the Isser is like a chila v'shtir, then before we do any other mitzvah, there is no Isser putting on the light or putting on a candle. It's only a malacha gemura, like toifer or oireig. But according to Rashi, Kedushas Shabbos, everything would be included. Nafkamina number two. Could a person drink water mitzvah Yom Kippurim before he makes Abdullah? That's a fascinating order of the Bris Karav. Motzei Shabbos, Shulchan Aruch clearly says, Chila v'shtia is also, but you could drink water, just like you could drink water before any other mitzvah. So the Bris Karav says, according to Rashi, it's a hemshech of Kedushas Shabbos. Motzei Yom Kippurim, koidim sheyavdu, there's inui, so you can't drink water. But according to the Rambam, it's all about Havdalah. Havdalah, there's no difference, Matzah Yom Kippur or Matzah Shabbos. Havdalah is the same Havdalah. That is nafkamina number two. Nafkamina number three, if we say it's a hemshech of Kedushas Shabbos, you need Havdalah Gemura. So, no, according to Rashi, Kedushas Shabbos, Baruch HaMavli ben Kodesh L'Choel. That is Mafkia Kedushas Shabbos. But if we say the Isser is because you're mechuyev to say Havdalah, what difference would it make, Baruch HaMavli ben Kodesh L'Choel? You need to make Havdalah. You need a proper Havdalah. This mitzvah rests upon you. So according to the Rambam, you would need Havdalah Gemura. So my first ha'ara on the Bris Karav is the Shulchan Aruch paskins Baruch HaMavli ben Kodesh L'Choel. And that is because that is the psak of the Rambam. Could we have the Rambam again on the screen? Perek Chavtes, Halacha Hey, Halacha Vav. The To'eles Harabi might have the Rambam before my eyes, but if we can have the Rambam again. So the Rambam, Perek Chavtes, Halacha Hey and Vav. So, Halacha Hey. וכן משיצא יום מוסר להתחיל לאכול ולשתות ולעשות מלאכה עד שיבדיל. הלכה ו'. מדברי סופרים לקדש על היין ולהבדיל על היין. ואף על פי שבט בתפילה צורך להבדיל הכויס. ומאחר שיבדיל ויאמר בין קודש לכל מותר לעשות מלאכה, אף על פי שלא הבדיל על הכויס. So the Rambam is the one that says, according to the Bris Karav, it's not Miktzas Kedushas Shabbos, it's all about Havdalah. But the Rambam clearly says, Ma'achar sheyavdil v'yomer bein kodesh l'choel. And that is the most abbreviated version of them all. He doesn't even write Baruch HaMavli ben Kodesh L'Choel. Havdalah kol behi, it's mutar. So this is a stila to the Bris Karav. He says, according to Rashi, it's enough to say Baruch HaMavli ben Kodesh L'Choel. But if it's associated with the mitzvahs Havdalah, the mitzvahs Havdalah is to say proper Havdalah. So the Rambam says, and the Beis Yosef's psak is based on the Rambam as always, as it is obvious in the Beis Yosef. So what I think is, however we define this halacha, and I think even according to the Rambam, it's not because of mitzvahs havdalah, but the other mitzvahs, there's an isur of achila v'shtiya, but other mitzvahs, achilas aray is mutar, malachas aren't also, and the Rambam clearly says ad sheyavd, there's an isur siyas malach. So it probably isn't because mitzvahs havdalah. My feeling, Laniya's deity, everybody agrees, it's not because of mitzvahs havdalah. Shelo kedivrei abriskarov berambam. On the other hand, the Taz is right. It's not really mitzvahs kedushas Shabbos. Tosefes Shabbos is over. Tosefes Shabbos ain't lo shiur. It is a takonas chachoma mishum kvoid Shabbos. Mishum kvoid Shabbos, it is as if it is still Shabbos. Osel asiyas melacha. Achila v'shtiya is associated with Havdalah. Melacha has nothing to do with Havdalah. And that is a fundamental question in the UK Lishonos. The Briskerov is Medayik. The Rambam in the same Melacha writes, Osa lahat chalechal v'lishtois v'laseis Melacha. So the Briskerov says, these three are the same Melacha, and I say no. Not necessarily. The Rambam writes, Ma osur v'ma mutar. V'chein mishiyetze hayoyim osa lo lahat chalechal v'lishtois v'laseis Melacha ad sheyavdil. Laniya's deity, ketalmid kotten adam lefnei rabosov abdela b'karka. But this is a fundamental question, which I dealt with 1,000 times. To what degree is there toikif b'dikduke lishonis? Laniya's deity, the Rambam writes the halachas, and the halachas are osa lechol v'lishtes v'laseis malacha. The reasoning doesn't necessarily need to be the same. Lechol v'lishtes mishum avdolah. Lasis Melacha, Kavoid Shabbos, the Lavoises Amelach. So some Rishonim differentiate between a Malacha Gemura and other Malachas. The Ritva, on one hand, he writes, Kiddushas a Shabbos. On the other hand, the Ritva writes, Onia Malachas Kva. The Ramah. Could we go back to Reish Tzadik Tes, Sif Yud, to the Sif in Shulchan Aruch, which we've been dealing with this entire year, Reish Tzadik Tes, Sif Yud. Osa lase shum malocha koidim sheyavdo. Ve'im yivdel betfila mutaf b'shilani because ve'im sorach lases malocha koidim sheyavdel betfila oima hamavdel men koidish l'choyel v'loi brocha v'oisa malocha. And then there are more rights. V'cheinoshim she'enon mavdilan betfilo yesh lalamdan sheyoim v'hamavdil ben koidish l'choyel koidim sheyasa malocha. V'yesh oimrim dekol zeh b'malocha gemuro kidon koise v'yoreg avrat lo kesaneh b'yalmo o etzol meshus l'shus ein sorach lezeh. So if it is the cause of Kedushas HaShabbos, how would there be a difference between one malacha and the other? And that is why I feel it's Mishum Kedushas HaShabbos, but not Kedushas HaShabbos mamish. It is as if Kedushas HaShabbos, in a very limited way, is fundamentally about Kvoid Shabbos. Kol zman shelo melave es hamelech. Don't get back to your routine. So yesh oimrim, Oni Melacha Gemura. Umezen es pashet aminig lahokal shamadlik eneres miyad shoimer hakoel bochu. Aval uikel kisvor shoimer. Mishnah Brura Sif Cotton Mem. Earlier, we had Sivkot and Lamed Gimel and Lamed Daled. Who Iker Kesavora Rishoyne. Baal Nefesh. יעשה כמו שכוסף בדר כמו שבשם הזרוע, וכן יישא בזויר, שלא עולה לקנה עד האחר, קידוש דסדרה. אבל חזן הכנסס, מותר עד לקנה, אחר שבתפילו היום וברוך עמד מקודש של חויל, משום קודש שבשש ובחודש שחסו. The Zohar says one should not do a melacha ad kiddusha desidra, and that is kodesh, kodesh, kodesh. After tefillah samidi, he was already mavdil b'tefillah, and that is better than baruch hamavdil and kodesh l'choil. Still shouldn't do a melacha. But at look at an error, the gaba yes, because people couldn't daven if he didn't put on the lights. And they didn't have a Shabbos clock. So the Gabbai, as soon as it was Seisek Yechovim, said, Baruch HaMadu B'Kodesh L'Choyim, and he put on the lights. The Chumrah of the Zohar, number one, is only regarding a Malocha Gemura, but the Rama says, no, we don't differentiate between a Malocha Gemura and a Malocha Ein Gemura, but that is a Chumrah. So the Mishnah Berurah says, that Chumrah applies to everyone, but not the Gabbai. Kvod HaTzibur. It's dark. So what we see in this Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah, it definitely is not Shabbos, and it also was not Triseh for Shabbos. It is Kvod Shabbos, and therefore some Rishonim say there's a difference. There's a difference between a Melacha Gemura and a Melacha She'eina Gemura. But the Mishnah Berurah said, the Ramah says, Halacha Kesvora Rishoyna. As long as you didn't say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil, you can't do any Melacha, nothing. But when you said Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil, everything is mutar. Comes the Mishnah Berurah, no, but the Dark Moshe, B'Shem Azarua, and the Zohar say, you said Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil, you still should wait till Kiddusha D'Siddur. So this is something new. In the Gemara and the Poskim, we talk about Kiddush Alakois, Kiddush B'Tfilah, Baruch HaMavdil. This is something new. Kiddusha D'Siddur. Mishnah Berurah Sivkot Mem. It is based primarily on the Zohar. So the Mishnah Berurah says, that is a Chumrah Lichatchila. However, the Gabbai doesn't need to keep that Chumrah Mishum Boyd Shabbos. Halacha L'Maaseh. It is only b'shas Chak if you need to do a malacha, you should say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil. If you are Mavdil B'Tfilah, that is better than Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil. There is a situation in which you forgot to say Ato Kohen Toni, you weren't Mavdil B'Tfilah. It's already after Kiddusha D'Siddur, but you can't do a malacha till you say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil. So Kiddusha D'Siddur is a chumrah. Even if you said Havdol B'Tfilah, you said Ato Kohen, and that is definitely better than than Baruch HaMavdil, still need to wait for Kiddusha D'Siddur. But that is a Zayah, that is a Midas Vasinus. So the Mishnah Berurah says, the Gabbai, even Lachatchila, doesn't have to wait. So this is a fascinating sugya. So the Brisker Rav says, Shnei Dinim. And to support what the Brisker Rav says to Drochem, I brought the machlokes between the Ravush and the Taz. Ibididi Talia, I would make a machlokes between Rashi and the Rambam, somewhere in the middle. It definitely has to do with Shabbos and not with mitzvahs Havdalah. It's not about mitzvahs Havdalah. Because by other mitzvahs, there's only an Issa Lasis Slachov. So in the Gemara, the Lashon is Shiasin B'Chafetzav, but the Lashon of the Rambam is Asiyas Melacha. And the Shulchan Aruch talks about Asiyas Melacha. Asiyas Melacha is associated with Kedushas Shabbos, not with mitzvahs Havdalah. But on the other hand, it's not the essence of Tosefes Shabbos. It is Ke'ilu Kedushas Shabbos, but it's all about Kvod Shabbos. As Rashi writes in Psochim, Hekera ba'alma lelavos esamelech, as Rashi writes in Shabbos. And that is why we find some Rishonim that say Malocha Gemura, also Malocha She'eni Gemura Mutar, Adlokas Neretzu is Mutar, Tamsis Advorim. Lechatchila, one should wait till after Kedusha the Sidra. Lechatchila, one should wait till after he makes Avdona Lakos. But when there is a need, one lechatchila could be Saimach and Baruch HaMavdel Ben Kodesh. So today we spoke about, as we usually do, from the Shorish of the Sugi, the Lamdes, the Agdoras, down till Halacha Namais. I hope it was a fascinating shiur. It was fascinating to me, like every shiur. Hope it was to you as well.